Okay, so yesterday we stopped at the ventilation. Um, the minute ventilation is just talking about the total volume of gas that enters a lung per minute. While the alveolar ventilation talks about the total volume of gas that enters the alveoli per minute. So that volume of gas that enters the alveoli is one that is actually undergoing gaseous exchange. While the one that is incorporated in the minute is including the one that is in the atomic dead space and the one that is also getting to the alveoli for ventilation, for gaseous exchange rather. Yeah. So what's the formula for the ventilation? It's just more like volume times frequency. So what's the volume? The tidal volume times the respiratory rate. That's the frequency. So tidal volume is going to be 500 ml per breath. If you multiply that times the respiratory rate of, let's say, like 20 breath per minute. So that means that you are going to have the minute ventilation, which will be that value in mil per minute. So that's a rate, mil per minute. So you are just multiplying the tidal volume times respiratory rate. That will give you your minute ventilation. If you want to get your alveolar ventilation, it's still the same thing like your minute ventilation. It's just that because of the fact that you are considering the air that enters only the alveoli, so that means that you have to remove the dead space from this tidal volume. So that will give you the amount of gas that's actually participating in gaseous exchange that's entering the alveoli. So that is your VD minus your physiologic dead space. So which is about 150 mil per breath. So that means that if you're taking 500 mil per breath of tidal volume, 150 mil per breath of that is going to be dead space that is not getting to the alveoli. So you just remove that, you multiply it as your respiratory rate, you can calculate your alveolar ventilation. Okay. So we move to the lung and the chest wall properties. Sorry guys, it's Dr. Zuliat here. Yeah, so the lung and the chest wall properties. I'm just going to start by talking about the fact that the chest wall has an inherent ability to, or tendency, not ability now, inherent tendency to spring outwards. That is, the chest wall wants to move outwards, increasing the thoracic cavity space to take in more air. While the lungs always want to coil inwards. That's the elastic recoil. They want to coil inwards so that they can bring out air out of the lungs. The chest wall wants to expand so that they can take in air. The lung wants to coil inward so that they can take out air. Now, before we proceed, let me quickly talk about the functional residual capacity. So we defined functional residual capacity yesterday as the volume of air that remains in the lung at the end of a normal tidal expiration, or at the end of a normal quiet expiration. That is functional residual capacity. At functional residual capacity, the lungs are at rest. They are resting. There's no inhalation, there's no expiration. There's no air coming in from the atmosphere into the lungs. There's no air moving from the lungs to the atmosphere. Although it's a very short period, immediately after expiration, inspiration happens again. So you don't have really much time to be for the lungs to be resting. Yeah. So what now? I have to also talk about some parameters. Um, let me see if I can make a drawing. Okay. So let's say this is the lung. This is the chest wall. So, and you guys know that um, the lungs is in between the chest wall. Mm, the space within that chest wall, that's where you have your pleural cavity. You guys remember that the lung is surrounded by the pleura. We have the visceral pleura that is directly investing on the lungs, and the parietal pleura that is, lining the chest wall. So in between the parietal pleura and the visceral pleura is the pleural space. This is the lung. Mm? This is the pleural space outside. There's pleural fluid there that helps to lubricate and assist with the movement of the lungs during inspiration and expiration. Okay, now there's something we call the alveolar pressure. The alveolar pressure is the pressure of the gas inside the alveoli, inside the lungs, like this. We have an outward pressure within this pleural compartment that we call the intrapleural pressure. The intrapleural pressure is outside here. Intrapleural pressure, the IPP. We have what we call the transpulmonary pressure. That transpulmonary pressure is working in this direction. Is trying to open the alveoli. Can you guys see the direction of my arrow? Hello?
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's trying to expand the alveoli. That's the transpulmonary pressure. The transpulmonary pressure is the pressure that keeps the alveoli open at any particular time. The transpulmonary pressure is the pressure that keeps the alveoli open at any particular time. If the transpulmonary pressure falls to 0, we are going to have collapse of that alveoli and it, fails to exist. Now, what is the factor that determines the transpulmonary pressure? The transpulmonary pressure is the difference between the alveolar pressure and the IPP, the intrapleural pressure. Now, at rest, the alveolar pressure is 0 millimeter of mercury. The intrapulmonary pressure, the intrapleural pressure is -5. It's a negative pressure. It's always a negative pressure, -5. Now, we've said that the transpulmonary pressure is the difference between the alveolar pressure and the intrapleural pressure. So that means that the transpulmonary pressure will be what? 0, 0, -5. So that means that the transpulmonary pressure is 5. Guys, this +5 transpulmonary pressure is what keeps the alveoli open at rest. So that means that at rest, we don't have collapse of the alveoli because we have a negative intrapleural pressure that is making the transpulmonary pressure positive, keeping the alveoli open. Now, for the sake of this discussion, we have to know that the atmospheric pressure is 0. Actually, atmospheric pressure is not actually 0. It is 760. But if we assume that it is 0, it will be very easy for us because atmospheric pressure will be transmitted to all the pressure that is downwards in the body. That is, if it's 760, you have to add 760 to this 0. You have to add 760 to this -5. You have to add 760 to the transpulmonary pressure. Do you guys get? So, in order to not make
I've lost it somewhere. Transpulmonary pressure minus intrapleural pressure is the alveolar pressure, or is it the other way?
No.
It's
Alveolar
alveolar pressure minus
IPP.
intrapleural pressure.
Can you see my screen? I'm writing it.
I'm seeing the screen. Okay, I lost it. So the transpulmonary pressure is the pressure within the lungs that is trying to force it to expand out, right?
Yes, across the lung. Don't say within the lung, across the lung.
Okay, across like there. Okay, then the intrapleural pressure is the one that is trying to make the lungs go inside a bit.
The intrapleural pressure is the one that is within the pleural cavity. It is a negative
causing
pressure.
a space to be there, causing there to be space there, Abi. It doesn't want it to go back, Abi.
Exactly, causing you to have space in the pleural cavity so that the lungs can also expand. So that the lungs,
and it's a negative pressure.
And it has to be a negative pressure, definitely. It has to be a negative pressure. Because it's negative.
So the one we just talked about is the intrapleural pressure.
Which one? The -5?
Intrapleural, yes.
Yes, that is intrapleural pressure. The one within the alveoli is the alveolar pressure. That's the one that is exerting its force within the alveolar pressure. The one that is acting across the alveoli, expanding the alveoli, is the transpulmonary pressure. So your transpulmonary pressure is the difference between your alveolar pressure minus your intrapleural pressure. So if you do that, 0 minus -5, that's +5. So it's a positive pressure that keeps your lungs open, preventing atelectasis or lung collapse. Now, you guys already get the reason why the atmospheric pressure is 0. We have said it's 0 because if we are saying it's 760, that means you have to add 760 to all these pressures. So just say it's 0 so that we can be looking at all these values raw and not make the numbers too cumbersome.
So
Is it
are
clear?
you saying that the atmospheric pressure is what is in the alveolar? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it transmits to the lungs.
Okay, okay,
So, and it will
okay.
affect them, individually. Do you get? So just make it zero. If you say it's zero, that means all the other ones are, maintaining their own raw value without the addition of your atmospheric pressure. Do you get it? Because if you are saying
Yeah.
atmospheric pressure is 780, that means we'll be saying intraalveolar this alveolar pressure too is 780. We need to add 780 to this IPP2. Then if we add 780 to this, we get 775. Do you guys get? So, it will be cumbersome.
That's all.
So it is zero, zero. Alveolar pressure is zero. Now, guys, if alveolar pressure is zero and intra and atmospheric pressure is zero, that means there's no net movement of air. So at rest, this is what you have. At rest, your atmospheric pressure is zero. The alveolar pressure too is zero. So air is not moving out or moving in into the lungs. Your IPP is -5 to make your transpulmonary pressure +5 to keep the airways open. I think that one is well understood. Now,
Mm-hmm.
let's go back to what we have. So, at functional residual capacity, there's a balance between that elastic recoil of the chest wall and the elastic recoil of the lungs. So that means that the lungs is not trying to recoil inwards so that they can bring out air, and also the lungs are not trying to recoil outwards so that they can bring in air. So that means that we have rest. No air is moving out, moving in. That's one point. The other point is that the um the atmospheric pressure is equal to the intra-alveolar pressure. You guys can see it here. The airway and the alveolar pressure are equal to the atmospheric pressure, which is PB, which is called zero. And of course, what will happen to the intrapleural pressure at rest? What happens to the intrapleural pressure that we talked about? What's the value?
Negative.
It is negative.
Negative.
It is negative. You guys can see why they said it's negative. It is negative, hence preventing atelectasis. That's the reason why it's negative. It's negative so that you find the difference to get the your transpulmonary pressure. You find the difference of the atmospheric minus your intrapleural. That means you'll be getting 0 minus -5. Because we've said intrapleural is -5. It's always negative. Atmospheric is 0. So that means 0 minus -5 will give us +5 transpulmonary pressure that will keep the lungs opened at rest. At that rest, the volume of air that is in the lungs is called the FRC. Very easy. And we have also said this point that the inward pull of the lung is balanced by the outward pull of the chest wall. So there's no air moving in, there's no air moving out. And the systemic pressure is atmospheric. We've said it. Atmospheric transmits, into those pressures that are inside. So that affects the system pressure. The last point I just want you guys to take note at FRC is that at FRC, at functional residual capacity, the pulmonary vascular resistance is at minimum. There are two major things that affect pulmonary vascular resistance: the resistance of the alveoli vessels and the resistance of the vessels that are outside the alveoli, the extra alveoli vessels, maybe your bronchial vessels and all those things, but not the alveoli vessels, the ones surrounding the alveoli, not those. Now, if you increase your alveoli vessel resistance, they are going to increase the pulmonary vascular resistance. If you increase the extra alveoli vessel resistance, they are also going to increase your pulmonary vascular resistance. Both of
Mm-hmm.
them increases but they have different changes. If you increase the lung volume, you are going to be feeling more air into the lungs. The alveolar vessels are going to be congested. They are going to be compressed. The alveolar vessel resistance is going to increase. The pulmonary vessel resistance is also going to increase. If you decrease lung volume, you are going to relax the compression on the alveolar vessels, but the compression on the extra alveolar vessels is going to increase. They are going to increase, and it's also going to cause an increase in the pulmonary vascular resistance. So, regardless of status of the lung volume, the pulmonary vascular resistance is is usually higher than the minimum. That's the point. We will not say that it is elevated, but it is higher than the minimum. You can only get the minimum at FRC. So at FRC, at that volume of FRC in the lung, both the alveolar vessel and the extrapulmonary vessel resistance are at their minimum. So that's another thing about FRC. It is only at FRC that the pulmonary vascular resistance is at its lowest level. Anything above FRC, any lung volume below FRC, it will always increase the pulmonary vascular resistance. Now, let's now go back to explaining this chart. Now, look at this chart because we are talking about FRC. FRC is always linked to tidal respiration because FRC is the volume of the of gas in the lungs that remains at the end of a normal expiration. So what we are looking at is a quiet normal breathing. Now, this guy tried to inspire. So at inspiration, the person inspires, taking air, the volume, got increased to 0.5. You guys know 500 mils is the normal tidal volume that we can take in. So got to 500 mils, then at expiration, it came down again to 0 at FRC. This is FRC. It doesn't mean that this 0 means that you have 0 volume in the lungs. No. It just means that that's the baseline you are starting from. You are starting from FRC. You are inspiring 500 mils of air during your tidal breathing. 500 mils. Then you bring out that 500 mils again. You get back to your baseline. This baseline is actually about 2.2 liters. That's your FRC. That's the volume of air that remains in the lungs at the end of a normal quiet breathing. Now, let us now look at the alveolar pressure changes and the intrapleural pressure changes that is causing this expiration and inspiration. Now, you guys remember when we were talking that if you want to inspire, that means that you must increase the pressure in the alveoli so that it will be more than the pressure.
I can't hear you anymore.
Sorry, guys.
Hello, Dr. Wale.
I had a call. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Can you guys hear now?
Yeah.
Sorry, let me just tell the person I'm in the class. Okay, guys, so you guys remember that I said that alveolar pressure increase. When it increases more than the atmospheric pressure, what happens? What happens, Dr. Zuliat? When you increase the alveolar pressure more than the atmospheric pressure, what do you think will happen?
If you increase the alveolar pressure more than the atmospheric pressure,
Yes.
the FRC should increase.
No. What I'm trying to ask is that what will happen to the movement of air? What happens to the movement of air? Will it move inside the lung or move outwards from the lungs? If you increase the alveolar pressure compared to the atmospheric pressure.
It should move inside.
No. Your atmospheric pressure has been increased from 0 to let's say +2. That pressure is high enough to drive, fluid will move from a region of high pressure to low pressure. So that means that you can drive air from the inside to the outside because of that high pressure. Do you get it?
No.
Like you have high pressure within the alveoli and the atmospheric pressure, which is the outside, is low. You move fluid from high pressure to low pressure. That's the normal thing.
Yeah,
Fluid moves from high pressure to low pressure. So that is why air will leave the alveolar compartment to the external environment. So causing what? Inspiration. So you can see that during inspiration, you can see that there is
if you move air from the alveoli outside, that's expiration. No?
Yeah, sorry, that's expiration. Yeah, that's it. So during inspiration, what do you expect? The atmospheric pressure has to be what? Higher than your alveolar pressure. So if your alveolar pressure reduces, that means that more than your atmospheric pressure, that means air will move inside the lungs from the atmosphere into the lungs. So let's now look at what happens during inspiration, what happens during expiration. So during inspiration, we're having a drop in the alveolar pressure so that it can be less than the atmospheric pressure, so that air can move in. But what is causing that drop in the alveoli pressure is actually due to drop in the intrapleural pressure. So this intrapleural pressure will be transmitted. So once you are having a change in the intrapleural pressure from the baseline, you guys can see that the baseline is already -5. Hello, I want you guys to
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Thank you for your response. I just want to show that you're following. So you can see that the baseline is -5. Now you remember Dr. Zilia that -5 is what is actually keeping that alveoli patent and
Yes.
not
Mm-hmm.
collapsed.
Patent at
Exactly.
first.
Exactly. Patent at
Mm-hmm.
rest. Yes. Now, when inspiration wants to happen, what the body will do is to contract diaphragm. So the diaphragm contracts, it descends. That contraction and the descension of that diaphragm create that negative intrapleural pressure. So your intrapleural pressure starts coming down from -5 to about -10. You guys can see -5
Mm-hmm.
to about -10. Now, that negative, change in the intrapleural pressure from -5 to -10, that means you are adding close to like -5. Although this is not even getting to -10, let's say -9. So from -5 to -9, that means you're adding -4. That -4 will be transmitted to this alveoli. So the alveoli 2 will now start going towards the negative. You can see that the alveoli 2 is going towards negative. So making
Mm-hmm.
the atmospheric pressure more than the alveoli pressure. So you have a gradient for air to move in. So the air starts moving in. But you notice that there's a subsequent rise in the alveoli pressure. The reason is because as air is moving in into the alveoli, it will be increasing the pressure in the alveoli too. So if let's say that you have reduced the intraalveolar pressure to from -5 to -9 by -4, -2 from that -4 is going to add to the alveolar pressure to make the alveolar pressure -2. The atmospheric pressure is already 0. Now, that will create a gradient for air to move in. As air is now moving in, it will now increase that alveolar pressure from -2 close to, it will start making it positive. Then, when it
Mm-hmm.
approaches 0, it stops. You can see when it approaches 0, inspiration stops. Can you appreciate that? It stops.
Yeah.
Now, the brain will now pick that okay, inspiration is done. Let us start expiring. To initiate the process of expiration, the diaphragm that is already contracting, that is generating this negative intrapleural pressure, will stop contracting. It will now relax. It will come up. It will now increase the intrapleural pressure. So it will increase it from this -9, it will start increasing it towards the baseline of -5. So if you want to increase from -9 to -5, that means you're adding +4. So it will
Mm-hmm.
transmit like +2 from that +4 to the alveolar pressure. So increasing the alveolar pressure to about +2, like we can see here. So that is generating enough force to, drive air out into the atmosphere, causing expiration. Now, as it's driving air out of the atmosphere, this alveolar pressure, air is leaving it. So that means that the pressure will now drop subsequently as air is leaving. That +2 that was transferred to it will be lost. And when it drops to 0, expiration stops. So at the end of this expiration, the amount of volume of gas in the lungs is called the FRC, because you just finished a normal tidal expiration. So you go back to your baseline of FRC. Now, you guys will notice that when I was talking about the intrapleural pressure, I was saying, okay, you are adding from -5 to -9, so you are like, removing maybe -4. Now we are saying we are adding, out of that 4, we are adding 2 to alveolar pressure. The remaining 2 will be added to the transpulmonary pressure to keep the lungs open. That's what they do. So that is why all the intrapleural pressure is not actually being contributed to the alveolar pressure. The remaining will be going to the transpulmonary pressure.
Okay,
So
so the intrapleural pressure is like the determinant of the volume of atmospheric air that is coming in.
yes, that is a very wonderful concept that you have established yourself now. So the intrapleural pressure is the starting determinant. And what affects the intrapleural pressure is what? Is the diaphragmatic changes that happens during each phase. So I hope
Huh?
that is clear now. I think that should be clear.
Okay.
Do we get it? Or I need to explain again. Do we get it? Hello?
I get it.
So,
I get
Baba,
it.
sorry,
But I'm
please, are
trying
you
to put it inside the
recording?
formula that you gave
Are you
us now.
recording?
The what? Hello?
Please, are you recording the class?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
Okay.
So me, I'm actually trying to say that I'm trying to put it inside the formula now. If we're to put that in the formula, like if the for example, the intrapulmonary pressure that we have now, we said it is minus. Are we going to write it as -4, -9?
Let's just pick anyone. I'm just trying to be accurate. Looking at the graph, here you get. We can pick anything. We should just appreciate
Okay.
that there's a drop. It's dropping from -5 to something. Now that change is going to be transmitted to the alveolar pressure because that change is a negative change. It's going to have a negative effect on the alveolar pressure too. So if it has a negative effect on alveolar pressure and it's reduced more than the atmospheric pressure, what will happen is that air will come in. Do you get it? So that is what I want you to pick. And another thing
Okay.
I want you to also pick and not forget is that alveolar pressure can be zero. Although long volume cannot be zero, the alveolar pressure can be zero, but your intrapleural pressure can never be zero. It can never be zero. It will always be negative
Negative.
so that it can keep the alveoli opened. That is it.
Open, dilated.
So
Because
it's
it's the
just that the
positive
negative,
pressure from heat that causes the transpulmonary pressure to keep it open.
exactly. It's just that the negative changes that happen to the intrapleural pressure takes it either to a more negative,
That's
thank you, either to a more negative or to a less negative. It doesn't take it away from negative. Do you get it? So if the diaphragm is contracting and is getting less negative, get more negative. So you get more negative from -5 to, let's say, like -9 or -10. That negative change, which is you adding another extra -5 or -4, will be transmitted to the alveolar pressure, making it also negative, so that it can create a gradient for air to move in from the alveoli, from the atmosphere into the alveoli. Sure you get. The opposite happens during expiration. So in expiration, the diaphragm is now relaxing. Intrapleural pressure is now increasing towards a less negative. So it's now increasing from -10 to -5. You know that's an increase. Do you get it? So don't let it confuse
I
you.
didn't really get that explanation now.
You said,
I didn't really get that. I didn't really get this explanation now.
you know, when the diaphragm contracts, the intrapleural pressure gets more negative. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
So it gets more negative from -5 to, like, let's say -10. Now, what are you adding? What is the negative change that you are adding? -5, right? That's the meaning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now that -5, just assume that you are transferring that -5 to the alveoli too. So your alveoli is now changing from 0 to -5 too. Do you get it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, that -5 to 0 atmospheric pressure, which one is more positive? 0
0.
is more positive. So that means that air is going to move in from the environment into the lungs, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is inspiration. Do you get it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, during expiration, the diaphragm that was contracting stops contracting and it will relax. What will happen to the intrapleural pressure when the diaphragm relaxes?
To be more positive, how do we call it now?
So
Its
yes, so
negativity will decrease.
it becomes
It will
less
become more
negative.
positive.
It will become less negative by you
Yeah.
adding more.
Less negative.
So instead of being -10, it will approach -5, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that means that you are adding a positive value to it. So that positive change, which is adding +5 to -10 to make it -5, that positive change is going to be transmitted to the alveolar pressure. So alveolar pressure will now become +5. Do you get? So when it becomes +5, it's now more than the atmospheric pressure. So that means that there's a pressure gradient to allow air to move out from the alveoli into the atmosphere. Do you get it? Causing expiration. But you must always remember that at the middle, the alveolar pressure will get to 0. Because I've told you
0.
guys that even though initially in inspiration it is a negative value that is in the alveoli that is causing hair to move in. But as that hair is moving in, the alveoli will move from that negative value towards a positive value, which is 0. So once it moves from -2 to 0, it will stop. Inspiration will stop. Do you guys get it?
Yes.
So that is the way it works. So once it stops, the process starts again. Expiration will now take over. And you guys must always remember what is responsible for the intrapleural pressure change. That is what you can use to explain it. When the diaphragm now starts relaxing, intrapleural pressure will go up. It will be more positive. So you transmit that positive pressure to the alveoli. Alveoli too will become more positive and it wants to push air out. So in the process of pushing air out, it's now going to get negative too because it will push the air out. The positive pressure it has gained from the intrapleural pressure will reduce to 0. So when it gets to the 0 at expiration, that volume remaining in the lung at that point is called FRC. That is it.
Okay.
So compliance. Compliance is talking about change in volume for a change in pressure. That is, if I apply pressure to a container, it's going to increase in volume so that I can accommodate that pressure. That is compliant. If I blow air into a balloon and it's stretching, it means that that balloon is compliant. If I blow air, that's a pressure, into a container and it's not expanding, it is less compliant. Very easy. Compliance is inversely proportional to the stiffness of a particular container. If the container is very stiff, it will be less compliant. If it's less stiff, it will be very, very compliant. Compliance is also facilitated by surfactant because surfactant will help reduce the surface tension. And surface tension, we have said it that it acts like elastic recoil that tends to bring something inwards. So, not outwards. And if something goes outwards, that means it is very compliant. But surface tension will try to bring something inward. So that means that surface tension is anti-compliance. That's what it means. So if I give somebody a surfactant that reduces the surface tension, that means it's going to favor compliance. Can you guys connect what I've said?
No, it's the rule. The inward, the compliance is a mix up.
Okay. Compliance means that if you blow air into something, it expands. That means that the pressure is causing a change in volume. Do you get it? If I blow air into something and it's not expanding, is the volume changing in response to that pressure? No. So that means that it is not compliant because it's not stretching to accommodate that pressure. Do you get it?
Yes.
Now, I'm now trying to explain surface tension. Surface tension, I said picture surface tension as if you are picturing elastic recoil. That is something recoiling on itself, coming together. Are you with me, Dr. Julia?
Yes.
Now, if something is trying to come together, do you think it's compliant?
No.
No, because compliant is coming outwards. Elastic recoil
Yes,
is
it's
coming
expanding.
together. Exactly. So that means that if you give someone surfactant, what will it do to surface tension?
It will reduce it.
It will reduce it. What will it do to elastic recoil?
Increase compliance.
It will reduce the surface tensions and increase the recoil.
No, you are saying it well
It
before.
will increase compliance, Abi.
It will increase compliance, but I don't want you guys to tell me that. That's not what I'm asking now. What I'm asking is elastic recoil.
You said if you give somebody surface surfactant, right?
Yes. What will it do to surface tension? What will it do to surface tension?
It will reduce surface
It will
tension.
reduce the surface tension.
That's very correct. So what will it do to elastic recoil?
Increase the elastic recoil now.
No. You know that we've said it. We've said it that surface tension and elastic recoil, they are like the same thing. They are both trying to pull it inward. Bring it together. You are bringing it together, not expanding it. You are bringing it together. So if you give surfactant that reduce surface tension, what will it do to elastic recoil?
Okay, so that means if we are reducing the surface tension, we are also reducing the elastic recoil.
Yes. So that means that you are not trying to bring it together. That means you are trying to pull it. So what will now happen to compliance?
The compliance is supposed to be poor, right? It's supposed to
So if you
The
give some,
compliance is
is it
supposed to reduce, right?
okay? So let me start again. Let me start again. Compliance and surface tension or elastic recoil, they are opposite conditions. Compliance means something can stretch when you blow air inside it. Elastic recoil or surface tension means that if you have high elastic recoil or high surface tension, that stuff will try to oppose together. It will not widen, it will not stretch, it will oppose together. That's the elastic recoil. They oppose.
Is that elastic, Dr. Babali?
Yes.
My concept of elastic recoil, is it not uh something that was probably squeezed together, now recoiling back to its shape?
No. Elastic recoil is something that was stretched, now returning back to its initial form. You guys picture a spring. If you stretch a spring, what will happen to it?
To bounce back to
It will
its
bounce back.
original position.
That is the elastic recoil. It
It's
will
okay.
curl
So the
back.
thing that I'm mixing up,
If
the
you
way I'm
squeeze it too,
picturing it,
wait, if you squeeze
like
it too, it will bounce back to
No,
its
now,
shape.
Dr. Lushola, you can't squeeze a spring and it will bounce back.
Have you,
it will expand if you bounce. If you squeeze
that's
it,
what
it will
I'm saying.
expand
It
back.
will expand if you squeeze it, it can expand. Like you
Look at the way.
compress a spring, then
Mm-mm,
it bounce back.
I'm not agreeing with you. Let me tell you why. If you look at
Okay.
the way the spring is designed, if you squeeze it,
Mm-hmm.
it will just go back to its
Mm.
initial form. You know,
Yes, it will go back to its initial form.
exactly. So you've not really done anything. But if you expand it, you can see spaces in between the springs. You can see the spaces there. You can appreciate that there's an expansion. It is that elastic coil that will bring it back to its initial form.
Okay,
Squeezing,
okay,
squeezing is not doing anything. Do you get it? You are just squeezing the
okay.
edges. It is this a spring is always well opposed. Okay, now let me ask you this question. If you take it, you will see what I'm trying to say now. If you pick a spring, can you separate the spaces in between the springs? Can you separate them?
No, I know that already.
Eh? Hello?
You can only expand the spring
You get it. You
to
cannot
change
put
the spaces.
you can see, you cannot put a Dr. Zuliat, can you put a pen in between the spaces within the spring? Can you that's already at rest? Can you put a pen in between them?
No, 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 no,
No.
no, no.
Unless
You
maybe
would
you are
have to
trying to apply,
expand it.
you have to exactly. So that means that initially they don't have spaces in between them. So that means that even if you squeeze it, there's still no spaces. But if you expand, you'll be able to appreciate the spaces. If you now leave it, it will go back. It will close the spaces. That is the elastic recoil. That's
Yeah,
the
so
elastic.
what me I'm saying, the way me I'm picturing it now, since I already know that elastic recoil is like coiling back, like returning to like the initial position after
Good,
an expansion.
good.
So when you say that if you give surfactant, since we know that it's supposed to promote elastic recoil or something, so that's why I said that if you give surfactant, it should
No,
increase the
no,
elastic recoil. So that means
no. Surfactant will not increase elastic recoil because we've said it that surfactant reduces surface tension. And I mentioned that surface tension is more like the same thing like elastic recoil. Both of them are coming inwards. That's what they do. They try to bring it inwards.
so the idea is if you reduce surface tension, you are reducing the elastic recoil,
Yes, that
right?
is it.
So
That is it.
when you're reducing elastic recoil, it means that you are allowing it to coil more inwards. That's what it's
No, no,
that's the
no,
interpretation.
no. See, elastic recoil is what will make it coil inward. If you reduce elastic recoil, that means that it cannot coil inward again. It will stay at that stretch position.
Okay.
Do you get it now? If it stays at that stretch position, what do you think will happen to compliance?
To
That means
reduce.
it's
It will what? No, say your mind. Say
increasing
your
the
mind.
vessel.
Say your. Oh my God, Doctor Zulia. Say your
Oh,
mind.
I don't know
You don't
what
see.
I'm
Dr.
saying.
Babali.
Know what
I
I'm
should not be.
saying.
The one that I want to understand is how come compliance means how is it answering you? Like, is it succumbing to your force, like to what you are trying to get it to do? Is
Yes,
it resisting or is it allowing you go ahead?
that's correct.
Now, you now said that surfactant reduce surface tension. So that means the force trying to bring back the lungs together is going to reduce it. So the lungs can spread apart some more,
Exactly.
so that
Exactly.
it can succumb to the pressure you're trying to the
Apply.
force you're trying to get it to go to.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we are now on the same page.
So what can make
Yeah.
it
But I mean, I
fast for you?
wanted to quickly clarify, Dr. Babawale. Just give me a second. This line, the inward pull of the lung, is balanced by the outward pull of the chest wall. Is that in as regards the intrapleural pressure?
Mm-hmm. I think
Okay.
so.
Is that
For my own
talking
reasoning.
about the intrapleural pressure,
Pressure.
such that
So
the space that the lungs have done by going inward is going to be balanced by the chest wall going, like, expanding out?
yeah, so
Is that
the way
it?
me I want you guys to picture it, so that it will be very easy to understand, is that you see this inward pull of this lung that they are saying, this is elastic recoil, guys. The elastic recoil, for this lung, that
Okay,
is that
taking
is what they
it
mean
back to
by
his initial position, right?
exactly. What do you think this inward
Okay.
pull of the lung will do, Dr. Luatobi? When you have inward pull of the lung, what do you think will do to the hair in the lung?
It will squeeze it out
It
now.
will squeeze it out. That's like you are
Yes.
expiring. Outward
Expiring, yes.
outward pull of the chest wall. What do you think that one will likely do?
Just for
That's
inspirating.
for inspiration. That means you are trying to create more
See
space
that?
for hair
Oh,
to
I
come in.
see.
So if you balance those
Yeah.
forces, that means that you are not favoring expiration, you are not favoring inspiration. The lung
You
is
just want the
expiring.
chest to be at rest. You
That is
just
it.
want everywhere to be at
At
rest.
rest.
Oh, that is why it is FRC,
That is why
like
it
at
is
rest.
FRC. At rest.
Oh, okay. Shit.
You get.
Okay.
So the only pressure, and that is why your atmospheric pressure is also zero. That's why your alveolar pressure is also zero, because if you have changes in any one of them, it will lead to expiration or inspiration. You know that?
Doctor.
Yes, I'm listening, Dr. Olushola.
So I want to ask this: that so does that mean that surfactant is helping compliance?
Surfactant helps compliance.
No.
Surfactant helps compliance.
It
Yes,
helps compliance. It helps it to succumb by reducing the surface tension within the lungs.
that is it.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm. Dr. Zuli, I don't let it go. See, surfactant prevents the lungs
No,
from
no,
collapsing on
Dr.
itself.
Oluwatobi, don't worry, don't stress yourself. Let me
Yeah?
just show us. Let me just show us what I've explained
Okay.
yesterday. I'll go back to what I've explained yesterday. So you guys will read it. So it's not me that is saying it now. So it is our textbook that is telling us. So let's go back to where it is in the textbook. So let us just go back to where it is in the textbook. So now this is surfactant here. Surfactant from type 2 pneumocytes. Surfactant reduces the alveolar surface tension. It reduces alveolar collapse. It reduces lung recoil, and it increases the compliance. If you are saying it prevents alveolar lung collapse, from what we have said, that makes perfect sense. Because if something is coming inward, that means they are collapsing. If they are coming inward, that is elastic recoil. If they are coming inward, that's also surface tension. You are preventing all that by giving your surfactant. So if
Surfactant.
sure you get, you are preventing it from coming
Mm-hmm.
inward and you are allowing it to come outward. Therefore, complying to any pressure. So that means that if you inflate it from now to heaven, it will keep stretching. It will keep complying
Mm-hmm. As long as there's surfactant.
as long as they are surfactants. So that is that. You know, I really spent a lot of time there because we still have some very
Fine.
difficult concept that we are still going to talk about. I don't really expect us to really have much issues here, but okay, okay. So so we've said it that compliance means increased change in volume for change in pressure, and it is inversely proportional to the wall stiffness. That's very easy to know. When the wall is stiff, if we apply pressure from now to heaven, they will not change. The volume will not change. The volume will not change, because for you to say something is compliant, as you are increasing the pressure, the volume is also increasing. That is it. A change in volume for a change in pressure is compliant. So, but that situation might not favor something that is stiff. If you try to increase volume, it might not respond. It might not respond. So, what are the conditions that can increase compliance? That is, what are the conditions that you can say that uh, there is no elastic recoil? So, someone that has emphysema, someone that has emphysema, they have damaged their elastic fibers. So that means that the lungs cannot come inside. That means that they can dilate. That's why you have hyperventilation in what do we call this? It's not hyperventilation. Yeah, it's still hyperventilation. That is, you have too much gas in the airway.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
can air trapping. There's air trapping.
Mhm.
That alveoli can distend to accommodate a lot of air. That's why you see them having barrel chest. Do you get it now? COPD, they have
Mhm.
a barrel chest because their functional residual capacity, their total lung volume, their residual lung volume, everything is increasing because of the air
Increased.
trapping, because of the increased compliance. Do you get it? Because of the fact that it is the elastic fiber that is damaged. And that elastic damage fiber is responsible for elastic recoil. So that means that if you damage the elastic fibers, you have reduced elastic recoil and you have increased compliance, because we said it that compliance and elastic recoil, they are inversely proportional. So surface tension and elastic recoil, they go together. The only one that is separate from them is compliance. So people that hold that adult too, the elastic fibers are reducing too. So the lungs are more compliant in them too. It's more very easy to feel. But people that is very difficult to feel are people maybe that have water, they have fluid, there's congestion or there's fibrosis within that lung. It will not be able to expand. So pulmonary fibrosis because of the fibrous tissue, pneumonia because of the congestion they have, depending on the phase of pneumonia. If they get consolidated too, they cannot expand. ARDS, because of
Mhm.
the inflammatory process that occurs in ARDS, they become less in ARDS, you have non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema. You have pulmonary edema in ARDS, but it's non-cardiogenic. So when we get to ARDS, we'll shed more light on that. But just know that pulmonary edema, that fluid overload there is also what is making it less compliant. Let's just appreciate this curve. So you have a curve with 3 lines. We can see the blue, we can see the green, we can see the red. So the red is moving towards the right, while the blue is moving towards the left, while the green is the one that is central. So we have a curve showing the volume on the Y and the transpulmonary static pressure on the X. So it means that as the pressure is increasing, normally we are supposed to expect an increase in the volume. So that means that if that one is actually happening, which side is the curve going to shift to? Anybody?
It should be shifting
To the what?
the to the left.
To the left. Thank you. How do I know that? How do we know this? Look at when the transpulmonary pressure is 0. Look at the volume in the red one. It is like 2. Look at the level in the normal one. It's like 2.5. Look at the volume in the emphysema. It is more than 2.5. So that means that the volume is highest, when it's actually shifting to the left. The change in the volume with respect to a particular pressure increases more when it increases towards the left, and it reduces when it's moving towards the right. So that means that we can say that this left situation is more compliant, right? So that's what you see.
Mhm.
So in a compliant situation, the curve is going to shift to the left because at a particular pressure, it takes in more volume.
So
Why?
more air is entering, so it is allowing more air to come.
Exactly. More air is
Okay.
coming.
Okay.
So is the volume also increases with respect to that air that is coming. So that's why we can say it's compliant. Why? For the fibrosis, at a particular pressure, the volume is less, even less than normal, because of the low compliance state. So they can give you this curve and tell you to interpret it. So when you are saying it's moving to the left, that means that the volume is actually increasing with the pressure. So you'll be looking for things that increases compliance, like older adults, like emphysema, like a chronic bronchitis. When you are seeing it going to the right, you know that okay, it's not actually increasing very well in response to that pressure. It's not compliant. Things like pneumonia and the likes. Now, quickly about hysteresis. So let me just quickly Google the curve for hysteresis so that we can appreciate what it looks like, respiratory hysteresis. So, yeah, so what I just want to show us here is that we must always remember that compliance stuff. It's very important. That surface tension, everything, we must remember it. It will be very easy for us. Now, what this curve is just trying to tell us is that we are looking at the pressure volume change, that is compliance, with respect to the phase of respiration that we are in. Are we in inspiration? Are we in expiration? How does it change? But you have noticed that the compliance is actually more at expiration than at inspiration. We can appreciate that from this graph, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Now, why is that? Do you guys remember the Laplace rule from yesterday? Do we remember?
Yeah, such that it is directly proportional. It is inverse to the radius, but direct to the what's the one on top of?
So
I can't remember the pressure on top, but I know it's 2 times.
I can't remember what is on top
over the radius 2 times.
So the collapsing pressure equals 2 times surface tension.
Okay, 2 times surface tension divided by radius. So the higher, the more the collapsing pressure, the lesser the radius, the more the collapsing pressure.
Exactly.
But the more the surface tension, the more the collapsing pressure.
Yeah. So can we also relate radius to surface tension? So that means that
radius and surface tension
more the radius, the more the surface tension.
The what?
The more the radius, the more the surface tension.
No, because you've already said
it.
The less is inversely now, Abi.
Yes, you've said it that collapsing pressure and surface tension, they are the same thing. Now, you've also said it that collapsing pressure is inversely related to radius. So it means that radius too will be inversely related to the surface tension. That is it. Do you agree with me now, Dr. Zulia? Hello?
Hello?
Do you agree with me now? Hello?
Yes. Like, I've not settled it in my brain. I don't know why my brain is processing very slow.
No, you don't. You see, this is it. You know, you've said it already that collapsing pressure is directly proportional to surface tension. And from this formula, collapsing pressure equals surface tension over radius. So that means that radius is inversely proportional to the collapsing pressure.
Yes.
So that means that if collapsing pressure is a friend of surface tension, that means that surface tension cannot be a friend to something that is not a friend of collapsing pressure, because radius is not a friend of collapsing pressure. It's inversely proportional, but surface tension is equal to collapsing pressure. So that means that we can see that radius will also be inversely proportional to surface tension.
Yes, now. Yes.
Yeah.
Even from the formula, it is 1 over radius.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you get? Yeah, it is 1 over radius.
Exactly. Now, look at this curve. Look at this curve. Look at this. I want you to look at this. Something that looks like this. I don't know this color. Is it blue now? Blue curve for inspiration. You can see that in inspiration, you are starting from low volume.
This is purple, Dr. Barbara. This is purple.
No, I think purple should be expiration now. Purple is expiration.
Oh, okay, expiration. Okay, then green. Yeah. Green, yeah.
Green, okay. So, looking at this green one for inspiration, look at where we are starting. This low volume. We are filling it with volume. You guys know that when you are inspiring, you are taking in air. So, it's going from low to high. You guys can see that the volume is increasing. Yeah. But that pressure that is increasing is not actually incommensurate with the pressure increase in expiration. Let's take one particular pressure. Look at this, my cursor. Look at this, my cursor, where it is now. Can you guys see where it is now?
It's at expiration, right?
Your cursor is moving up and down.
It's moving, it's still on jubilee, but we know you are talking about expiration.
It's opening so many tabs, like.
Okay, so guys, what I'm trying to picture is that, what I'm trying to do is that, just pick any pressure. Pick any pressure along that line, that x-axis, then trace it up. You notice that at that particular pressure, you have more volume change in expiration than inspiration. Can you guys see that? If you trace it, pick any particular pressure, check the volume in inspiration and check the volume in expiration. Which one is it greater at?
Expiration.
At expiration.
Expiration.
At expiration. Now the reason why
Mm,
that is because
mm.
when you are inspiring, you are trying to fill from lower volume to more volume. So that means that the radius is still very small initially. So what do you
Everybody calm
guys
down. You lost me. Because I feel like expiring, you are getting it out. You're trying to reduce the volume. Okay. Okay.
from starting?
You are just trying to bring out of it.
Exactly, from starting. That's why I said from starting.
Okay. I think I get now. It's like you're trying to reduce, you're trying to bring
You
it
take out
down.
of
It
what you
is
already
high
have.
already. Yes.
Okay.
Unlike inspiring, you are trying to fill an
Fill
empty
in what you don't have.
can. Yes.
Exactly. So
Okay.
you can see that they put arrow in both curves. They are putting arrow there. Inspiration is going from low volume to high volume. Expiration is going from high volume to low volume. Now let's look at the starting. Let's look at the starting of inspiration. That means that this is actually the starting of inspiration. Where this my cursor is here. Can you guys appreciate that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You are at zero now, right? At the
I'm
right
at zero.
angle.
I'm at zero exactly. So at
Okay.
that zero,
Okay.
there's no volume because you are just starting. The radius is what? Very small. So
Yes.
what happens to the
Yes.
collapsing pressure when there's small radius? What happens to the collapsing pressure?
It will be very high.
It will be very high.
Increase.
It will be very high. So what
Yeah.
happens to so the collapsing pressure is very high. What happens to the surface tension there?
It's going to be same
Is
high.
It's going to be high too.
is yeah, is high.
Yeah.
Exactly. So surface tension too is high. So what happens to um the compliance when there's increased surface tension? What happens to the compliance?
It will be low.
It will be
It's
low.
poor.
So that means that if you apply pressure at that point, what volume change do you expect? Do you expect a high volume change or low volume?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No,
Nothing.
it's low. Yeah.
Now look at it
Minimal.
minimal. Now look at it when you get up. When now follow the arrow, you notice that as you are going up, that pressure.
Brother, can you hold on a bit? Don't move again. Just stay where you want to stay.
Yeah, I have to move that
Just
cursor. Okay, so just
no,
look
No,
at
because there are lots of
they are
it
like
moving, so
20.
that we
They are
can
like
see just
20. So
one.
I even want to try exactly. I just want to try and see if I can figure out where you are now. You get like there are like 20 arrows now,
Cautious.
right now.
okay. So guys, maybe I will not use it because I'll just use my mouth. So you guys can see this
Okay.
blue arrow that is moving up. So
Mm-hmm.
you can see that as we are moving up, you're actually noticing that the as you are increasing the pressure, the volume is also increasing with it because
Mm-hmm.
you are having an increase in the volume. You're having an
In
increase
the
in the
radius.
radius. You're having an
Yeah.
increase in the radius,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
which is now helping you reduce the collapsing pressure,
To
reduce
pressure,
And
yeah. So it
reduce
cannot
the
close
surface
up on
tension.
itself. Reduce
exactly
the surface tension. Yes.
reducing
Yes.
reducing the
And then
surface
you are
tension.
increasing the compliance.
Exactly. And you are increasing the compliance, you
Yeah.
can take in more
Yes.
volume.
More volume. That makes sense.
So
That
that is
makes
why
Mm-hmm.
sense.
so that is why if you look at the tip here where it joins with the expiration one at the
Airfield.
top, you can see the
Airfield.
tip up
Yes.
where they wrote airfield.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That airfield is the ending of inspiration and the beginning of expiration.
Yes.
You can see that it is at that portion that the compliance is actually maximum.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because at the beginning of expiration, that is when it is fullest. That is when the lung is, most stretched. That's when the radius is highest.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of inspiration, that is also where the radius is also what?
Highest.
Highest. So when
At,
the radius
at
is
the
Highest.
end,
No,
exactly.
when
okay, and
expiration at the
I thought you said
beginning
at the
of
end of
expiration.
expiration.
No, no, no. I said at the end of inspiration, at the beginning of
Inspiration. Okay.
expiration. Do you
Okay.
get?
Okay.
So that is where those guys are highest, and that's where you expect most compliance. So
Mm-hmm.
you can see
Mm-hmm.
that the at the pressure at that area is actually filling with the highest volume. If you trace the pressure, you
That
can
makes sense. That
but
makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
but you are still noticing that there's a difference. The difference is the space in between those lines because at each time is always better at expiration than inspiration. Because inspiration will be trying to adapt to that situation, but expiration is already there. Because in expiration, the volume is already stretched, the radius is already,
Yes,
large.
inspiration is still trying to open up, increase the
You get,
radius,
you get,
fight with the collapsing pressure,
you get.
fight with the surface
The
tension.
coil.
But
Yes,
inspiration has overcome all those ones
all those things.
already. So
Exactly.
it's just so it can take, there's more volume by expiration. I
So,
think I get it
so
now.
the best way to just say it is that at a particular pressure, at any given pressure, at any given pressure, the compliance doing inspiration is always better than the compliance doing expiration is always better than inspiration. That is it. If you take any pressure, you will see if they're actually the same at any pressure, this line will fall on each other, but they are not falling on each other. One is in the right side, one is on the left side. So it means that the one on the left side is actually the most compliant, while the one on the right side is less compliant compared to the, you know. Do you guys get it?
Yeah, I
Yes,
think I get it now.
I get it too.
So what you just want to say in this curve is that I'm just trying to explain why there's a difference, but what you must always say about hysteresis is that because of those factors that we have aforementioned, the compliance during expiration is always greater than inspiration. Because during expiration, you have more volume, at a particular, if you compare it to that phase of inspiration, that expiration will always have more volume because it is actually coming down from higher volume. So because of that, the radius is higher than the expiration time, and it has less collapsing pressure, less surface tension, more compliance. So that's just what they want you guys to appreciate. That is one of the ways you can explain. There are other, you know, parameters, but let's just stick with that to hasten our understanding. Mm.
So, Dr. Babawale, this long hysteresis, is it a condition or what? Like,
Yeah,
I'm trying to.
it's a normal physiological condition. It's a normal physiological condition. Do you get it? So,
Okay.
if you try to, measure the compliance of a lung when it is inspiring, it's different from when it is expiring. That's just what we are just trying to tell us.
Thank you
Okay.
so much. I think I now
Thank you so
understand it.
much.
So the lung inflation is has to overcome multiple forces, unlike the expiration that just has a smooth ride. The
Exactly.
if inspiring has overcome all the battle. So all you just need to just get it out, and then it
Exactly.
goes downwards. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
thanks.
yes.
It's clearer now.
So,
Thank you.
but you guys must always relate it to compliance. That is what is important. So
Yeah,
the
which is so.
compliance, compliance in expiration is always better than compliance
Okay.
in inspiration due to the surface tension changes that happens. Yeah, so that is it. So let's talk about the pulmonary circulation. So the
Yeah,
pulmonary circulation,
sorry, let me say what you just said now. Compliance in inspiration is 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 what?
You say
Wait,
expiration.
Let me
Compliance
see.
and
Compliance
expiration.
in inspiration is
Say expiration, so it will be
lesser.
easier.
Compliance in
Okay.
expiration is lesser than in
Expiration.
expiration. Expiration is better,
Mhm.
right? Is
At
that
any
it?
given point, yeah. Compliance in expiration is always greater than compliance in expiration at any given point. At any given
No,
volume or
you have
something.
said the two of them differently. Dr. Baba, say what you just said now.
I said compliance in expiration is always
Okay.
greater than compliance in
Uh-huh.
inspiration at any
Okay,
given
that makes
volume.
sense.
yeah. So
Okay.
if you don't want to use the word
Okay.
compliance, Dr. Zuliat, can you
Mm.
relate it to pressure volume changes?
Yes, I can. So
Okay.
if I don't want to say the word compliance, I'm going to say um I'm coming to
For every
uh
there's always a higher pressure in expiration than in inspiration. There's always a higher volume for every pressure in inspiration In
You
expiration
tried.
than inspiration.
You tried.
In
So
expiration than inspiration. Yes.
yeah, so that's a fair thing. So to put in simple,
Expansion.
you just say that the volume change, at a particular pressure is highest or higher because you are comparing two things. The volume change at a particular pressure is higher in expiration than at inspiration. The volume change in response to a pressure is compliant.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Do you get it? So
Mm-hmm.
if you say that, we understand what you are trying to tell us. The volume change in response to a particular pressure at a particular pressure is more during expiration compared to inspiration. That is it. So pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation has a very low resistance. Hello?
What happened to the baby?
Why are you laughing, Dr. Toby?
It's okay. I'm just I've written it down. Thank you.
Okay. So the pulmonary circulation has a low resistance.
I hope we are recording. Oh, I hope
Yes,
we've
I
not
am. I am.
forgotten.
It is highly compliant.
Okay.
It has thin wall and it has low pressure. So one phenomenon that I just want us to pay attention to here is that hypoxia in the pulmonary circulation causes vasoconstriction, unlike in other vessels. In the brain,
Yeah, other vessels.
if there is vasoconstriction, if there is hypoxia, it dilates to bring in more blood. But the lungs, they
No
don't do that.
blood.
They don't do that. The lungs will vasoconstrict so that you can shunt that blood to other areas that have good oxygen supply. That's what it does. So hypoxic vasoconstriction phenomenon happens in the pulmonary circulation. Now, there's a formula that I want us to know. And this is a formula: diffusion equals area. You might not need to cram this formula. You don't need to cram it. Just know that area, you know, and the pressure change. Area times pressure change is directly proportional to diffusion. If the surface area of the diffusing membrane is high, there will be more diffusion. If the pressure gradient of the compartment that you are trying to diffuse across is high, there will be diffusion. Just like what we are looking at from the alveoli to the atmospheric pressure. Let's say that there's a barrier in between them. If the pressure within the alveoli is high, more than the atmospheric pressure, that pressure gradient will cause it to move and diffuse across. Then the last one I want us to pay attention to is thickness. So thickness is this delta one, delta X. So thickness is inversely proportional to diffusion. If the diffusing membrane thickness is too much, you'll hardly find it difficult to diffuse across. Guys, that's very clear now. Dr. Oluwashola, do you get that? So if we increase the area of the diffusing membrane, diffusion increases. If we increase the perfusion gradient or the pressure gradient, diffusion increase. If we increase the thickness of the diffusing membrane, which is the alveoli wall, diffusion reduces. Do we get that? Dr. Zulia, is it?
So the only thing that will reduce diffusion, which makes sense, you're trying to get air
Thickness.
to permeate everywhere. So once you increase the thickness, it's more difficult for it to enter inside. So thickness is just the only one that can limit or prevent
Exactly.
diffusion of air into. Yeah, all right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I get
this
that.
is exactly what we are doing. So if this is the alveoli, if this is the capillary, you know, this structure in between them is the respiratory membrane. Now you want to move air from here to here. One thing that can allow that air to move is when you have abundant pressure here, so that that pressure can drive the air here. So that's the pressure gradient. P1 is far more than P2, which is P2 is here. P2, P2, P, P1. Do you guys get that? So if you have more pressure here overcoming the P2, you can have flow. Another thing is the surface area of this diffusion membrane. If it's very thin, if that diffusion membrane is very thin and the surface area is very high, it can easily flow. The last one is now thickness. So if it's too thick, it has to work more to pass through that membrane. You guys get? So thickness is inversely proportional to the diffusion. Is it clear now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. So before we come down to the condition that causes all those things, let's quickly talk about perfusion limited, diffusion limited. I know this is not the first time you guys are.
Very important. Like, and it's so confusing. Very annoying thing.
Don't worry. I will try as much as possible to explain it well. I know that that stuff is kind of very challenging, but I want you guys to just try to follow me and let's see if we can do it. So, I will need to use a diagram. Uh, so yes. So let's use this one. Okay. Now, there's the alveoli here. There's the respiratory membrane here. There's the blood capillaries here. You guys know that blood is coming from the pulmonary artery, right? Then it's going to the pulmonary capillaries, right? Which is this portion that the exchange is happening. Exchange happens at the capillaries. Now, it goes out at the pulmonary vein.
Through the vein,
That contains oxygenated blood. So the oxygenated blood is what is coming here, or blood that is rich in CO2. So this one here is very low in CO2 and high in oxygen. All right. So now, when we talk about the concept of perfusion limited, I'm going to start that by talking about some gases. So we are looking at CO2, we are looking at oxygen, and we are looking at nitrous oxide. CO2, oxygen, and nitrous oxide.
Now, so nitrous oxide is because nitrous oxide is in atmospheric air, right?
No, not really. It's just that if we give it, it can, diffuse fast. That's just it. Don't worry, you'll get it.
Okay.
Let's continue. So, if you have, let's use oxygen that everybody's familiar with. Okay. No, don't let me use oxygen. Let me use CO2 because oxygen has comma. Now, CO2 is very abundant in this blood, right? Dr. Oluwatobi, you agree with me? This blood that's coming from this PA is very rich in CO2.
Yes.
So, the alveoli, which is this one, is not very rich in CO2. The partial pressure of CO2 in the alveoli is lower. It's around 40. 40. Why the partial pressure of CO2 that is coming from here, let's say like 46. That's high. Do you guys get? Now,
so I'm wondering, why is it not like 30, 70? Like the one in the alveoli should be like 30 or even 20. And then the one coming should be like very high. It should be like 60, 70. Do you get my point?
Like,
or it's not like that. The equilibrium is not like that. It's just by feel.
It equilibrate at 40. It doesn't go below that 40. They will
okay. So
even if you are coming with like maybe 70, at the end of the day, before it gets to the pulmonary vein, it will equilibrate at 40. So it is that 40 that you also take in to this alveoli. So that's the way it works. So because this 46, this extra 6 that you are taking in, that 6 will have been taken out. So they will leave it at 40. Let's say you are using 46. Let me use 46 first. If you are taking in 46, 6 will diffuse into this guy. Now, when 6 diffuses in, 6 from here will diffuse out. When you
Dr. Mama, your course, we have problem with it. So you probably want to describe what you're saying. Like diffuse into, is it to the lungs? Is it into the where are you talking about?
Okay.
Because I'm not following with the cursor.
So look at this PA. PA is the oxygenated end, right? That is the end that contains high amount of CO2. Do you get? So let's just assume that the CO2 level there is 46. Do you get? Now, the one in the alveoli is 40. That's the normal PaCO2. There's something called PA, capital A, because this is alveoli, not arterial. PaCO2. You can see what I'm writing, right? PaCO2 is what? Is 40. Now, PA small a, P small a CO2 is 46. That's the one in the arterial blood. You get? That's the one that is coming to the pulmonary capillary for oxygenation. So as it's entering into this pulmonary capillary, there's already a pressure gradient. What's the pressure gradient? 46 and 40. There's a pressure gradient of 6. Now, you remember that we're talking about one equation, that pressure gradient also facilitates diffusion, right? So That pressure gradient allows diffusion. So as it transverses this pulmonary capillary, before it even gets to the 1/3 of this pulmonary capillary, this 6 will have diffused into, you
Into the
know,
alveoli.
exactly into this alveoli. So the alveoli is going to take out 6 to the air through the process of ventilation. It's during the process of expiration, you take out the 6.
Mm-hmm.
So that means
Mm-hmm.
that eventually you have equilibration of, this deoxygenated blood containing 40, and it's going to equilibrate with the one in the alveoli of 42. Do you get? So by the time it's getting to this PV end, it will be 40 that will be there.
Okay.
Do you get it? Now,
Yeah.
that is that about um your CO2, your PCO2. And again, one thing that also happens is that this PCO2, this CO2 as it entering, you know, it's okay. So let me stop there for CO2 so that I won't cause any confusion. Let us go to the angle of oxygen. So if you are looking at oxygen, oxygen that is coming from this um PA end is what? It's deoxygenated. It has very little oxygen. The oxygen level in the
Yeah.
alveoli is high. It's about 100. That's the PiO2, PaO2, about 100, 100, 100. There's already a gradient. Now, when that 100 diffuses into this pulmonary capillary, all the 100 is not going to diffuse. They will just keep diffusing little by little. As they are diffusing, they are combining with hemoglobin. Do you get it? Now, with time, they will saturate the hemoglobin, and you see some of them entering into the plasma because hemoglobin is in the red blood cell. So some of them will enter the plasma, and those ones will exert your pulmonary arterial, your partial arterial pressure of oxygen. Do you get that? But that partial pressure of oxygen will equilibrate, you know, with the alveolar pressure. So with time, by the time it's getting to this venous end, because of that diffusion, it's going to get to this venous end and it's going to be at 100. Actually, it's not 100, it's actually 90, but we'll talk about the reason why it's not 100 later because I don't want to waste time with that. So as it's moving from PA to PV, oxygen is diffusing from the alveoli into the vessel. Now,
Mm-hmm.
some of that oxygen is going to bind to hemoglobin as oxyhemoglobin. After it has saturated the hemoglobin more than its capacity, they are going to spill into the plasma, right? And you see, the oxygen that is in the plasma, that's the one that exerts partial pressure. Do you get that? We have to know that information. It's very important. When you say partial pressure, that is the one, it's not the one in the red blood cell because the one in the red blood cell is bonded to by hemoglobin. It doesn't exert
Hemoglobin.
pressure. So the one that is free in the plasma, that is the one that exerts the partial pressure. So with time, that pressure is going to equilibrate with this 100. So as it's flowing, oxygen is diffusing. They will bind to hemoglobin. Some of them will now start spilling into the plasma. So it's going to start increasing from the, what do we say came in? Let's say 70. 70 came in. As it's moving, it will start increasing 75, 78, 80, 90 till it get to 100. So it will get to 100 even before it gets to 1/3 of this vessel because it equilibrates fast. So by the time it's leaving the pulmonary vein, is at 100. So it has equilibrated with the alveolar pressure of 100. Do you get it?
Yeah, I get it, but I thought you said that it's not supposed to be 100 because
No,
hemoglobin is taken out of it.
just know that 100 now. It's a slight different 90, 100. I will explain the
Okay.
reason. Don't worry. We'll talk about the reason why it's not fully 100. But knowing that it's 100 or 90 will not harm you. The thing
Okay.
is that it will equilibrate with the alveolar pressure. All right. Now,
Mm.
now, um, that is now when we now say perfusion limited, it means that that when it equilibrates, I said by the time it gets to 1/3, it has already equilibrated with the alveolar pressure of 100. It has already getting to 100 by the time it's getting to the 1/3. 100 in the vessel, 100 in the alveoli. Now, Dr. Zuliat, the pressure gradient is what? At that point, when it's 100, what's the pressure gradient?
There is no pressure gradient if it has
There's no pressure
equilibrated.
gradient. there is no pressure gradient because that pressure gradient will be zero at that point.
Yeah.
Once it gets to 100, there's no pressure gradient again. So, Dr. Zulia, what will now be driving it? Nothing will drive it. The only thing that can drive that continuous flow is now to increase the blood flow so that the blood now can now wash those red blood cell, those plasma away. The ones that are well oxygenated, you to wash them away and bring new deoxygenated blood to establish the pressure gradient again. Does it make sense to you? So that the new one that's now coming will now be 70. Then the process starts
We can start again.
again. So that means that it is the perfusion or the blood flow that actually drives that process. Do you get it? The same thing happens for nitric oxide. So even if you inhale your nitric oxide is diffusing. Your nitric oxide diffuses fast, and they find their way into the plasma to equilibrate with the alveoli concentration. Let's say that the alveoli concentration of nitric oxide is 40. The one in the pulmonary artery is 30. So because you have inhaled it to 40, you need to equilibrate it. The one in the vessel has to be equilibrated with the alveoli one. So it equilibrates fast to 40. There's no gradient again. When it equilibrates to 40, there's no gradient. You need to increase perfusion so that you can wash it away and take in new one that is containing less nitric oxide. That's it. Now,
Okay, so what we are basically saying, Dr. Babali, is that at every given time, based on the amount of blood that flows towards the capillary for the exchange thing to happen, so after the equilibration has happened, you cannot get it to add to remove more. You just need to bring fresh blood that needs to be exchanged if you want there to be more exchange.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Why? Because of the equilibration. You must always mention that equilibration. If we have not said that equilibration, we have said nothing. We must always mention it. We will see the importance of that equilibration by the time we are looking at the graph. Now, let's now look at carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is the only stubborn one that doesn't follow this normal rule. Why? When someone
CO, Abi?
yes,
CO.
CO. So when someone inhales CO is not even a gas that you can take too much because CO is very toxic to the body. So if you are using it as a test, you don't take too much. You don't take very small, maybe like 20. Just inhale like 20. Now, one thing about CO is that CO has the highest affinity for hemoglobin. Out of all these three gases, O2, CO2, and CO, CO has the highest. If hemoglobin sees the three of them, it will pick CO, leaving the other ones. That is why generator fuel like generate CO can kill people fast. Because hemoglobin will no longer be binding to oxygen, it will be binding to CO up and down. Now, that concept is now very, very harmful and deleterious. Why? When the blood starts coming in, they have hemoglobin in them. CO is going to diffuse across this membrane and enter that blood. And they will start binding toward the hemoglobin. They will bind to hemoglobin to the extent that you will not have any CO available to be free in the plasma to exert the partial pressure. Do you guys get that? I've said it already that
you will not have any what?
Any CO to be free in plasma. All of them will be bonded to hemoglobin.
Okay, to hemoglobin. Okay.
You know that it is the free one that is exerting that pressure, that partial pressure. You know that it is the free one, right? Now, when there's no free one, all of them, and again, you are not taking too much. You are even taking small. So that means you cannot have more to be, to be escaping into plasma. All the CO that you take, you will always find one hemoglobin to bind to. So the partial pressure of CO in the plasma is virtually zero. That means that you have a constant pressure gradient. Do you get it? Which is this 30 or this 40 which one did I even say? Is it 20 that I said? So this 20 will always be against zero. I don't know if I've made any sense. So that 20 will always be against zero. So that means that the pressure gradient is not a problem. There's no equilibration with the alveoli. It doesn't equilibrate with the alveoli. It doesn't.
Okay.
So that means that we don't need any blood flow to be coming to washing anything out. So that means that what is driving that movement is only the diffusion. It is only once you block that
Yeah, the
diffusion
ability of CO2 to
to diffuse,
permeate.
you get to move. You
Mm,
get, you
mm,
get. So once it can't move, forget CO. You will not find CO in your body. Mm. Because in
mm-hmm.
someone with CO2, it is not enough to have diffusion only. What if it diffuses? If
You
it
need
diffuses,
blood to bring it in.
to bring it out again, to wash it away. Because if you are relying only on diffusion, it will quickly equilibrate. And when it equilibrates, the pressure gradient is cancelled. So what will now be driving diffusion? Nothing. So you need to push in blood so that they can wash it out to establish that concentration gradient again. But in carbon monoxide, you don't need to be establishing any concentration gradient because concentration gradient is always maximal. 20 will always be against 0 because there's no free carbon monoxide to be exerting pressure in the plasma. All of them are always coupled to hemoglobin. Does that make sense to us? That's why they say carbon monoxide is diffusion limited. Now let's go to our graph. Let's now appreciate what they put in the graph. Now let's start with PaO2. Now guys, I've said it. What did I say about big capital AO2?
That's the partial pressure at the alveoli
At the alveoli. So
of
PA,
oxygen.
exactly. So P small a is what?
P small is at the arterial end.
At the arterial end. Now look at this point. Look at this point where all of them are converging. You can see that that area is labeled partial pressure. So let's say that the partial pressure is around 46 at that area. So you can see that as you are moving along the length, you can see the curve for length, the one on the x-axis. You can see that one is on the left. So that means that once we are going to the right, we are increasing the length. We are moving across the pulmonary capillary. Do you guys get? And once we are moving up, we are increasing the partial pressure, right? Now, if you look at the starting partial pressure of 46, let's say this is 46, you can see that oxygen is rapidly increasing in the partial pressure, as you are moving along the length, and it equilibrates with the partial pressure of the alveoli, PaO2, at this point. Can you guys see that point? Having traversed less than 1/3 of the length of the capillary, you can see the length where it achieved that equilibration. You can appreciate it. Can you
That's
see it?
very early.
Very early. But you can see that it actually equilibrates. So that is it. That is it. Look at CO2 too. CO2 in the venous end, because this length you guys are seeing is actually from the venous end to the arterial end. When I say venous to arterial, I don't mean that I mean actually from the pulmonary artery to the but what I'm saying venous end, like the one that contains less oxygen or high CO2. Oh my, I should not have said that. I will have confused you guys. What I mean is the end that if we are starting from pulmonary artery is this 0. That's the length at this end. At the pulmonary artery, what's the level of CO2? Is it high or low?
It's low, like initially.
No. At the pulmonary artery. The one that's coming from
pulmonary artery.
yeah.
Pulmonary artery. CO2 is high at the pulmonary artery.
So what's
initially
the level of oxygen?
Is low.
Is low.
Initially.
So that means that Dr. Zulia, we can confidently say that at the end of this pulmonary capillary, we'll have been approaching the pulmonary vein, right?
Yes.
So now at this starting, this pulmonary artery, we expect the PCO2 to be high. You can see that the starting PCO2 is around more than 40, is around 45 or 46. Now, when it equilibrates, does it come up or comes down for CO2? When it equilibrates with the alveoli, will it come up in the vessel, or will it come down?
It's coming down. The way I'm looking
It comes
at it.
down. You get, because what you have there is 46. So that means that it has to equilibrate with the 40 at the alveoli, because it has to get exchange into the alveoli. So that means that as it's moving along the pulmonary capillary length, the level of PCO2 will come down. So that is why you are seeing this decrease from this 46 to around 40, and it equilibrates with the alveoli 1 very early. Just like oxygen, you guys can see the way it's coming down. Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
But for oxygen in the pulmonary artery is very low. So it's starting from 46 and is increasing to 100 or to the value of the alveoli one, which is at P capital AO2, which is what you are seeing here, equilibrating. But if you go to that of our carbon monoxide is never equilibrating with the alveoli. It is never. You can see that it's not touching any of the lines. It is not equilibrating
Yeah.
anything. You know, it's just diffusing into it, but it's not equilibrating. So once you see, if they label this
And we
down
said
one,
the reason for that is, sorry, you said the reason for that is because of its high affinity to hemoglobin, right?
hemoglobin, definitely. So it will not equilibrate because the one that exerts the partial pressure is the one that is free within the plasma. That's the one that you can see that is equilibrating with the alveoli. Do you get? So everything is
Mm-hmm.
coupled, so nothing to exert partial pressure. So this little increase that you're even seeing is maybe the little that find their way into the plasma, maybe little, but it will not eventually equal to what will be in the alveoli. Do you get it?
Yes.
Even if little find their way, maybe when you have 30 CO to 20 hemoglobin, let's say now 10, 20 out of that 30 CO, 20 of them binds to the 20 hemoglobin. It's now remaining 10. Now that 10 will now spill into plasma. You can see that that 10 is not still equal to the 30 that is in the alveoli. You get? So it doesn't equilibrate with the alveoli. So it will just increase a little, but it will not equilibrate with the alveoli. You can see. So that's why we are saying it is diffusion limited, because the gradient is always there. You don't need blood flow to establish any gradient. It's not dependent on perfusion, but only dependent on the diffusion.
Diffusion.
That is it. Now, the last one before we go is now, before we move from here, is now oxygen. Now, oxygen is the only one that can show both perfusion and diffusion limitation. Why? Because the diffusion of CO2 across that respiratory membrane into the blood, or CO2 from the blood into the respiratory membrane, then into the alveoli, is 20 times that of oxygen. That is the rate at which oxygen will diffuse from the alveoli into the blood, and the rate at which CO2 will diffuse from the blood into the alveoli. CO2 is 20 times more capable than oxygen. So diffusion is never a problem of CO2. But diffusion can be a problem for oxygen, because that diffusion itself, it can be affected, especially in condition of fibrosis and emphysema. So in all those kind of conditions, it can actually affect the diffusion of oxygen from the blood, from the alveoli into the blood. So it will not eventually equilibrate with the level in the alveoli, because not too much will be able to find its way from the alveoli into the blood because of that fibrosis affecting the pulmonary membrane. Do you guys get it? Because we've said two things affect diffusion. Emphysema is one of them, fibrosis is one of them, because we've said it that if there's increased thickness, there's reduced diffusion. Fibrosis will increase the thickness. When there's pulmonary fibrosis, there's increased thickness of the respiratory membrane. Now, the diffusion process that is not even very efficient compared to that of CO2. You are not even now increasing the thickness. So that means that the diffusion for oxygen will be kind of restricted a little. Emphysema will cause damage to the alveoli. They can collapse. Hmm? No, sorry. The what's it called? What's the
The
use now?
um
You know,
overextend, or what do you call it?
exactly. So you can have air trapping within them. So it can also damage the alveoli. So the surface area of the alveoli at the end of the day will be very small. So if the surface area is getting small from emphysema, it can affect the diffusion too. So that means that it can also limit diffusion for oxygen. So that means that the perfusion limited state of oxygen is actually when the lungs are healthy. When the lungs are healthy and there's no problem with the respiratory membrane. So oxygen flow is said to be perfusion limited. But when there's an affectation of the um the respiratory membrane, it becomes diffusion limited. It will not really affect CO2 because CO2 diffusion is very, very effective. So the damage has to be very, very extensive before it can affect CO2. Because the diffusion of CO2 is 20 times that of oxygen. It's very, very fast compared to oxygen. That's why it's very rare for all these conditions to cause hypercapnia. They will cause hypoxemia first before they can, they can cause hypercapnia, because CO2 diffuse very, you guys can see the statement. Oxygen diffuse slowly, while CO2 diffuse very fast across the alveolar membrane. So it will take a very severe damage of the alveolar membrane to make CO2 diffusion limited. Do you guys get it? So oxygen is perfusion limited and diffusion limited. Carbon monoxide is diffusion limited. CO2 is only perfusion limited. And there are some conditions that can make oxygen diffusion limited. Emphysema, pulmonary fibrosis, anything that affects these factors that we have talked about, the area, the thickness, So, is it clear to us? I think.
I think so. Yep.
Dr. Luatobi, is it clear to you?
Yeah, it is. But I think if I see a question that talks about it, it will drive it home some more.
Yes.
But I get the overview now. Thank you.
So one thing is, you must be able to identify the cause of each of these charts. The one that is up is oxygen. The one that's next to it is fibrosis. The one that's okay is the partial pressure is actually increasing, but it's not equilibrating totally with the alveoli. So that means there's problem with the
That's
membrane.
it.
That's CO2 That's oxygen. That's like fibrosis or emphysema. Then the one that is down, that's equilibrating, but it's coming down, is our CO2. Then the one that is just rising up little, but it's not eventually equilibrating.
Oh, I think I now get what you are saying. I think I now understand this. So the idea is oxygen will be increasing outwards, but it will equilibrate, but it will be in an increasing direction while you are trying to get rid of CO2. So it will be equilibrating, but in the lower portion. Okay. I don't know if it makes sense, but that's what I'm trying to master this stuff.
So, and remember that PCO is starting from zero. Starting from zero because you don't have it in the blood. You know that you don't have it in the blood before.
CO, yeah, it's not found in the blood, yeah. Exactly. But from the definition of terms that you gave, P capital letter A is alveolar, right?
Exactly.
Then small letter A is the pulmonary arterial, right?
Yes. Partial pressure in the arterial.
Okay.
Arterial, exactly.
Okay. That's the pulmonary artery now.
Yeah, so if it's pulmonary artery that we are taking it from, pulmonary artery. If it's the femoral artery, we just call it PA. We shall know that it's an artery that we are taking.
Okay, it's an artery. Okay.
Exactly. So, pulmonary vascular resistance. This pulmonary vascular resistance is not very high yield, but we should just pay attention to the formula. So, resistance is always, pressure is always flow rate times resistance. That's it. Pressure is flow rate times resistance. So, if you do the cross multiplication, you get resistance to be equal to pressure over flow rate. So, the flow rate is actually our cardiac output. That's the Q, cardiac output. So, the pressure difference that we are taking note to calculate the pulmonary vascular resistance is the pressure from the starting, which is the pressure at the pulmonary artery, minus the pressure at the left atrium. But this pressure at this left atrium, the reason why we are picking the left atrium is that it has been noticed that the left atrium changes. Pressure changing within the left atrium can affect the pulmonary vascular resistance. Do you guys get? So that is the reason why we are, someone that has a mitral stenosis now, so they can easily go into, pulmonary edema very fast. So that pressure actually affects, your pulmonary vascular resistance more than the other ones. So that's why we are taking at the other end. So if you want to calculate your left atrial pressure now, we are going to measure your pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, because you cannot measure the left atrial pressure directly. So you measure it as the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. So if you find the difference, you divide that by the flow rate, which is the cardiac output, you get your resistance. So then from physiology, we also did is it physiology now or cardio? We also did a formula that relates resistance. So resistance equals 8n is viscosity times length over pi r raised to power 4. So it means that the higher the radius, the lesser the resistance. That's why when we're talking about parallel circuit, when you connect something in parallel, the total radius in that arrangement reduce the resistance. So if you connect in straight,
And that's why hypertrophic and hypertensive heart disease will result in arrangements in parallel, so there'll be reduced this thing.
after
So I'm
losing.
just trying to apply it. Yeah, I'm just trying
Okay,
to apply it. Yeah.
yeah, it's fine. So, like, in concentric hypertrophy, you have a parallel arrangement. You are correct. So in
Yeah.
eccentric, you have a series arrangement. Yeah. So
Mm.
so yeah. So that is that. So but what we are looking at here is actually the vessels. So if you arrange